was really thinking about what should we call this. We realized, we've got community practices, community knowledge matters, a lot of the word community, and so we wanted something just to really highlight what the real aim of what today is, which is hearing some amazing practice around community-led research happening on the ground. And so really delighted to have in our first example of this, Deepness joining us, who will do this, who will talk about their work, particularly across the Western Isles and further, of course, including the world's first People Living with Dementia-led Dementia Arts Festival, which was incredible. Having been there, I still don't know if I fully recovered, to be honest, and that was back in November. So yeah, the aim of today is really to be really informal and just kind of a very light touch facilitation from our part, but I just wanted to set the space. And then very briefly, I think everyone here probably is likely connected to Community Knowledge Matters, but just a wee reminder, so we have come from the Ideas Fund, and the idea around this work is kind of building a kind of a systemic exploration of what community-led research could look like and how we could embed this, particularly in the place across Highlands and Islands. But of course, we really welcome people to learn from the Highlands and Islands, from across Scotland and the wider UK. So for those of you who might be coming in from other places, I think we've got people potentially from England and Ireland on this call already. I know you're very incredibly welcome. And so this really is a space for us to connect, share learning, and we've got a forum online space. We've got monthly community practices alongside these conversation stations, and then we will have the opportunity to kind of build capacity, share, and develop resources and some collective advocacy to encourage this way of working in practice and policy. And we'll very at the very end talk a little bit about our in-person meeting, which we just officially announced in the 10th of June, those of you lucky enough to be near the Highlands and Islands. That is enough from me. I have the absolute pleasure to introduce Ron and Kirsty from Deepness. They've been doing incredible work, really pushing the boundaries, I think, and the activism around the importance of lived experience leading research and leading particularly around the value of creativity and arts to support people living with dementia, agency, autonomy, and mental well-being. And I certainly feel like every conversation I have with Ron and with Kirsty is a real masterclass, and I take so much away personally. So really, really pleased to be able to introduce and have them hear more about the project. I think to kick off, we will have a wee video, if that's okay, and then I'll hand over to Kirsty and to Ron.
Scotland's first Dementia Arts Festival will take place at the Eden Court Theatre from November the 13th to the 16th, 2023.
When I'm doing that, I'm not thinking about dementia, I'm thinking about what I'm doing, I'm thinking about the art.
I think at the moment in Scotland there is an extraordinary amount of creativity around in the dementia world.
I mean, there are people who are going to sing, there's going to be music, there's going to be poetry, you name it. It's going to be a circus.
The festival will include original songs.
That handsome cowboy on the cover.
I don't know who did that. I'm a singer. I like to sing.
Dementia the Symphony, accompanied by live dance. A singing workshop with Sophie Bancroft and Tom Lytle. Original pieces of theatre.
For I will hold precious all I can remember, for that is truly mine.
Why I Do Art with Willie Gilder. Screenings of original short films.
I've lost him. Can you, if you see him?
A clowning workshop by Magdalena Schamberger.
There's lots of little pockets of lovely things happening, and this feeling of, yeah, this is really important.
We're trying to really get an understanding of what it means to be an artist living with dementia, and how does art contribute to well-being.
You know, the lights turn on. They don't see people with dementia. They see actors and singers and musicians. Then we'll have achieved what we want to achieve.
Very much. Take it away, Ron and Kirsty.
Yep, good morning, everybody. I got the job of kicking it off, and I've got this wee note that says, introduction, Ron, 5 minutes, so I'm going to stick to that. And
I think we want to spend more time discussing. My name's Ron Coleman. I have vascular dementia, and I've had a cognitive impairment for over 7 years, and vascular dementia for the last couple of years. So that was the amount of time it took them to move from impairment to what the kind of dementia I had. I'm also the chair of Deepness, which is a not-for-profit organisation that's run by and for people with dementia. So our board is 15 members, 10 of whom have dementia, and we have 5 token normals on our board. So we've reversed that idea that you bring one person with the condition onto your board, to saying that if we're really going to practice what we're preaching, it needs to be led and run by people with a condition, not as secondary actors, but as primary characters within the whole option. And I've worked with Kirsty, who's there. We wave, Kirsty, and Lee McAdam, who's also there. Lee's Edinburgh Uni, and she's our external person, because what happened to Kirsty was quite interesting, I think, because normally in research you try to stay away and be, what do they call it, objective. Whereas what's happened is Kirsty took part in the festival and was dancing with one of the professional dancers, and Kirsty is a dancer in her other life anyway, so she got to dance. And it wasn't just there. Lewis, who's up there he ended up playing a fiddle session and nearly got us all banned from Eden Court forever, because we were all dancing and doing things we shouldn't be doing. And last week, Kirsty and I were in Poland doing a presentation, and I don't believe how it works, where people can sit in a room for about 2 hours listening to academic language all the time. So when we started it, we got everybody to stand up, move around, say hello to people, then sit down, because they hadn't moved for an hour and a half. So we did that. And when we finished, somebody said, "Can we dance?" And we said, "Okay." And one of the women that had also presented then put on music, and we had a dance in the conference, which was a bit different. So I think the first thing I would say is that when we set out on this journey, we set out to change things. We didn't set out to maintain the status quo. The status quo is what's failed us up to now. So doing the same thing again and again ain't going to change anything. So we decided we wanted to be very different. But we still had some aims and goals that we wanted to achieve. And the first one was to develop a rural dementia arts collective of people with dementia. And that is beginning to happen. More and more people are beginning to come together. And we also wanted to really look at what does the creative arts do for us in terms of people with dementia over the piece. And I can honestly say the first thing that it does, and I mentioned it in the film, is when I'm doing something like a play or music or something like that, I don't think about dementia. I think about what I'm doing. So there's a clearly a benefit to doing the arts just in that one thing. But more than that, we believe that by being involved in the arts world allows us to shift our journey. I will now be, nearly 8 years since my very first diagnosis, and that's normally when you're going into a care home, if you look at the normal journey. I'm nowhere near going into a care home yet. In fact, I fully intend to die in my own bed. And I think the arts are the thing that have got me going. On October the 12th this year, I wrote a musical, and Creative Scotland have funded it, and it goes on a Scottish tour on October the 12th. I'd never written anything like that before I got dementia. So actually having dementia's become, for me, just a new phase in my life. It's not, and yes, I see a progression. People that know me well see a progression. But if you didn't know me, you wouldn't notice. It's only people that know me that notice the things that are changing. We wanted to create an annual arts festival. That was one of our dreams. And last year we were in Inverness, and we started in Stornoway. We did a show in Stornoway, and then we moved to Inverness for 3 days. This year we're doing 2 events in the Highlands. One is in Stornoway, one's in Inverness, and then I'm sorry, but we're going south for a wee while. We're going to Edinburgh, mainly because we want to get this picked up across the whole of Scotland, and so it's part of our strategy of getting greater involvement across Scotland. Although the focus of any ongoing research will just be with the Highland group and looking at Highland and Island and look at the changes we've had. And we've already seen changes in people, both positive and negative. We've got one singer who's definitely progression with Alzheimer's is quick, but every time he sings, he becomes a different person. And so the answer for me is keep him singing. No put him in a care home, just keep him singing for a bit longer, and let's see where we go and how he responds to that. We're also and the last thing I'm going to speak about and then hand over to Kirsty is we also want to build a group of peer researchers. I've been lucky enough to, Kirsty's come into my world and I've gone into Kirsty's world a bit. And what we want though is to create a whole pool of peer researchers that can really look at how and what is impacting on our dementia journeys. And that'll always be within the arts world, because we feel that that's where we actually thrive, rather than continue on that journey that leads us to meet whatever we meet at the end. So I'm going to hand over to Kirsty at this point.
Thanks, Ron. So I think that's exactly our goal. And as Ron said early on, we're not here to keep it the same. And the nature of living with dementia, as Ron says, is an ever-evolving process. And so for us and with Leah, we really focused on an asset or a strength-based approach to this. And for peer research, and we will get to that larger question later on, that really means being flexible and adaptive and creative. And so it really starts to push on boundaries of what we understand research to be and how it gets done, and who considers it research, and who can participate. And so really having that strength-based focus, and we kind of built in, Deepness has some very strong values around autonomy, and so Leah and I really thought about how can we have a values-based design, and how can we approach this in a way that allows us to be in a constant conversation and constantly able to respond to our peer researchers and the people that are involved. And Ron has been our number one guy in all of this, but what has been really beautiful is that we've had Willie, who you saw in the video, who was chronicling basically all our field visits and festival participants and different meetings and interviews, chronicling it through his art. And we've had Hugh, who's been taking photographs, and we've had everyone participating in a way that makes sense for them. And so we really broaden our understanding of how do we collect data. And one of the first things was what is data, and how can we use all different kinds of forms. And it's been very interesting as a researcher to have we were in the conference at Poland and had people trying to assess well-being with a tool. And one of the things that Leah and I first came to was that this is a little bit madness. There are tools, great tools out there for well-being, but they really don't capture the lived experience of it and the unique nature of it and the contextual nature of it, and really the conditions under which well-being is affected. And so I had this conversation with a group from Singapore, and I was like, how is that working out for you, taking the survey of people's well-being who are living with dementia? And they had, the question for me was, how's that working out for you with photographs and videos and interviews and all this random kinds of data? And I was like, well, it's all everything is, it's what it is, right? This is we're just capturing lived experience. Lived experience is varied by its very nature. So I think for us, really centering on how can we have people involved in ways that make sense for them, is really pushing on our understanding of peer-led research. And it has been, we were lucky at the festival to have people like Kirsty and Lewis, who as funders were in group discussions and really participating as artists as well. And I think that's we don't see that in the research world. And the funders are somewhere distant in an office somewhere that we're not really sure where. They never really see what it is that we're doing on the ground. And I thought that was a very valuable thing to have. So our peer-led research has been a variety of data gathering techniques. It has been it's been a very responsive design to involve everybody in ways that made sense for them. We were constantly asking people what they preferred to use, how they preferred, even with meeting with us. We thought we were going to have online meetings. No, we're not. We're doing field visits, and we're being with people, and we're doing art together, and we're having conversations, and that's what it meant for us. So at this point, we should probably lead into things we've learned and challenges we've had. I don't know, Ron, do you want to start with this?
No, I'll let you go on.
Okay, so we've learned a lot. One of them being that if we really want to understand well-being, that it's so important to really hear people's stories. And as we said, one of the things that came through very early on was that the arts brought people alive or recovered pieces of who they were. And for many people, if you take Alan and his singing, for example, and we have other people who are singing in the Western Isles, it's a different person in front of you, and we're all different people inside us. And so this has really been about how can we animate all these different dimensions of people. One of the things that has also come through is this power of togetherness in terms of how can we create welcoming spaces and environments When we first went to Eden Court, I think that, well, we know, and we were told by some staff how scared they were that there was going to be a dementia arts festival. The thought of them having a group of people living with dementia in Eden Court was frightening, and I'm not quite sure what they expected to have happen. Were we going to run amok and riot in the building? I don't know what that fear was about, but it was very interesting because the staff were phenomenal, and they also participated with us in all kinds of ways in terms of making things happen and adapting and bringing resources. And we had several people come up to us throughout that festival saying, this has changed my life. I have changed my perceptions. I've got family members who have dementia, who are living with dementia. I had no idea that this was possible, that they were capable, and that's a stunning comment on how we view this particular condition, and more importantly, how we view people who are living with this particular condition or not viewing them at all. We have had some considerable challenges in terms of access, I would say, Ron, right? And but that, I mean, we all know, I'm an ethnographer, we all know about gatekeepers, and we all know about guardians, and we all know about who a capacity, and we all know about consent, and we all know about these things. What's been very interesting for us is how decisions have been made for people living with dementia, whether to participate with us or not. And those decisions have not been made by people living with dementia. And in many ways, Ron's gone to have some very provocative conversations with people about that. It's like, who do we believe in autonomy. How can you decide that? And in other ways, we've had wonderful people who have done whatever they could to have people join us, travel, and made things happen. And so really, as much as we know that gatekeeping exists, I think it has been surprising to us the degree to which organizations have patrolled that border. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Ron, at all.
Yeah, I think that kind of especially things like people having rights over you as a person with dementia. So my wife has a power of attorney. Now I still have capacity at the moment, and she doesn't ever use it. But a lot of people don't realise the best time to get your power of attorney in place is before you have a capacity issue. And if you've got that power of attorney in place, then the one person I would expect that would really follow what I wanted to do in my dementia world would be my wife. I trust her. And therefore I'm protected, but I'm not governed. And one of the things that we've asked that happens, and I guess this is where the impact's been, that we've been really invited into the new strategy on dementia in Scotland. But not only that, the new capacity, the review of the Capacity Act. And one of the things we've asked is that everyone that gets a diagnosis of dementia immediately be informed of their rights to have a person with power of attorney, and to understand that the power of attorney can be easily broken by the person. I just need to write to my solicitor saying, I don't want my wife to have that anymore, and it's gone. So it's not, alas, I'm not going to do that because I don't need to, but there could be situations. So I do think there were unexpected issues. Is it okay if I mention one of the people that we've had some real joy with that's continuing at this stage, which is a woman who was in a care home
And at the moment, she's negotiating getting back into the community. That doesn't happen. That is
She's young too.
Yeah, that is
She
not
run.
the progress. She's got a young onset condition, and what she's discovered is that by finding, she used to be a singer, and by refinding that voice, she's beginning to reclaim what's hers again, which is the right to be autonomous. And so we're hoping that quite soon now she'll join us on our island, because that's a place where there is a different kind of accommodation available, and that she'll become part of our weekly group and meet with the others during the week, and things like that, so that she comes into, and we're not a system, but she comes into a space where her creativity will not only be encouraged, it will be totally valued. And what I mean by that is we've got not a bad track record now of turning people's songs into albums and working with people to create, not just that's great for a concert, but on a record label with an album. In fact, one of our DJs, Ronald, he said to me, what's great about this is when people ask me in the past what I did for a living, I would say, I don't do anything, I have dementia. Now he says, when they ask me that, I say, me, I'm a DJ, how cool is that? And I work in a radio station. And the guy's changed when he found that way of working. Sorry, I'm going on about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's been, I don't think we can underestimate the power of the arts. And for this person in particular, it's literally finding her voice or reusing her voice has meant actually using her voice as a autonomous being and saying, I don't want to live in the care home anymore. I want to be in community, and I want to do this and I want to do that. And we now have to, of course, navigate through her power of attorney, even to have her come to Stornoway and record. We have to navigate through her power of attorney. But I think we've also had issues with in our very best intent. We embraced local partners and to help us record stories and video and things, and even with very clear commitments, both promises that we had made to the group that was working with us, and promises that they had made to the filmmakers had made to us, that we saw breaches of those promises, and we were in terms of them violating the guidelines that the group had set up, and that was quite shocking for us, to have that intent, and then also to have interesting conversations around how we can get the film from them. So it hasn't been without its struggles around people's ideas of capacity, also around people's ideas of what it means to be a partner, and also if a group says to you, we do not want to have, it's a men's group, and if they say we do not want to have women in the room, and the women who are actually supporting the group have said, we stay outside, that's their thing. They get to have that conversation together every Friday. That's them doing their thing. If everyone is saying that, you do not have a female filmmaker go into the room and film them. And we don't really understand why that was suddenly thought that was appropriate thing. So we've had some very interesting conversations also about partners like her. And we're not kidding, we are trying to honor people's requests and commitments, and we intend to hold them to that. So in terms of what we want to do next, we've had lots of questions come up from this project. As Ron says, we're pretty much on a journey here, both in terms of raising the visibility of what the arts can do, and also raising questions around capacity and around peer research and around the importance of community and the importance of togetherness, more importantly, for really recognizing that who we are as individuals in the world comes down to who we are with others and the importance of the people that are around us. Ron, do you want to say anything else about what we're want to do next?
Yeah, the only thing I can talk about really in that area is where we want to go is to really explore using the arts as a means of disseminating information, because I think sometimes arts is seen as a bit fluffy, when in actual fact it can be really quite hard, quite strong in terms of how it does. Example for in my personal life is over the next, starting in January, I'm going to start a PhD by performance. And so I'm going to be working on using, and in a funny way, I'm going to have to do a PhD the wrong way around. I'm going to have to start with my piece and make sure I film everything, so that if my condition goes downhill, they can still accept what I'm doing as part of my performance as part of the PhD. And that was suggested to me by a dementia college. But it's part of a university that I should do this. And we're hoping to, Kirsty and I are hoping to continue working together for the next 4 or 5 years at least, because every time we do something, we end up with another question. And that's just what research is. But I think some of the questions we're asking now are more interesting in a funny sort of way than the stuff we asked at the beginning, which was really important. And we're going to continue looking at that over the next couple of years. But we want to go forward into how do we get this kind of practice accepted in the mainstream? And that'll only be done by gathering together the evidence and showing that it can be validated. And then I have to learn to use all the jargon that we're saying, let's put in a jar. And I will if I need to. And that's just what it is. It is what it is. So that's yeah. Wow.
That's us.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Ron. Kirsty, you got through the questions. That was incredible, and also massive congratulations, because I didn't know that about your PhD, which is incredible news, Ron. I think it must be relatively recent. Yeah, a lot of claps all around. So much in there to unpack, and I have so many things around, around autonomy, around. I would be so intrigued in terms of how that interacts with like ethics and all your, your questions about peer research in terms of and arts as a determination tool. I'm really going to encourage everyone who's listening to, please do let us know what your questions are. Put your hand up if you've got any questions, or if you want to prefer, just write them into the chat. I also realized I forgot to ask everyone to introduce themselves. So if you do ask a question, feel free to let people know who you are. And just to contextualize, I realized I should have also set a bit of context in terms of how this work came about, particularly in terms of the peer research, because you referred to a few things that actually might make a bit more understanding about the Ideas Fund in general. So very, very quickly, Deepness and this partnership is funded by the Ideas Fund. The whole idea about this work, which Science Clearly is supporting, it's funded through the British Science Association. Some colleagues are on the call, and the whole idea is about how people living with lived experience and lead research. And so it's flipping the traditional narrative of research, where funding goes to the researcher, they find a partner, and then a project happens. And what we're trying to do is work with people with lived experience, particularly in Heinz and Heinz, they get the funding, and then we worked with Ron to partner. Do you remember this whole process, Ron? With yourself and Karen to kind of interview and meet different researchers, and then decide and develop a project from there. So there's kind of an incubator model, and then Kirsty, we introduced Kirsty, and there's also Leah, who's also on the call as well. And so from that process, this kind of wider peer research project, working with a few different partners across the Highlands and Islands, developed, and it's kind of gone from there. Obviously, we've had the festival, and there's been an extension as well. So I just feel like it's important to mention that, because otherwise, without that background, actually, I should have mentioned earlier. Maybe that helps set the scene for the questions. But yeah, welcome thoughts, reflections, comments from anyone on the call. Shannon, straight in there. I love it.
Hi, I'm Shannon from Open. I'm the peer researcher up here. I'm just really curious, and I hope this doesn't come off as rude, but are you doing your peer research on the individuals that you're researching with dementia, or is it the whole community group with dementia? And the reason I'm asking is I'm so interested in the singing thing, and the whole art stuff is so amazing and so interesting. And I think it was Johnny Cash that said singing helps heal a troubled soul. And I just feel like it's such a beautiful thing that you're doing, but I'm wondering how are you researching that person's journey from how the singing heals them and brings them back to themselves? Or is it actually the whole group as a collective that you're doing the research on? Or is it a mix of the two that all kind of helps you report on? I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It's a mix of the two, Shannon. So, so of course, there's individuals within groups, yeah. But part of it has been groups who are just in fact arts groups already in existence. I'm thinking like the Stornoway group, and also Ullapool, and to some extent Barra. But then also within that there are other individuals as well, up in Caithness, and then in US and Becula, etc. So it's a bit of both, and we've kept it very, even within the group context, we've kept it very open as to how people can, or to the degree to which they can participate or not, or choose to participate or not. And so there are group conversations and group discussions, and then there are also individual interviews as well, if that makes sense. Because I think the group is a powerful thing. There is a definite effect, and that's one of the things that has come through very clearly, and the need, even for those who we work with individually, the need for those individuals to be part of something, and the desire, very strong desire to be part of something. And I'm thinking of our singing friend Ron.
Yeah, I mean, we in Stornoway, our group's based in our meeting centre, and what's changed about our meeting centre is we no longer have support workers. We now have artists and residents who work with the group. So, I'll be honest with you, it's much easier to find money for the arts than it is to find for support workers. I think it's a different type of challenge, but I find it easier, and maybe that's because that's where my head is. So, and my heart is in the arts, so I tend to be much more passionate. When I wrote with Kirsty the bid for the Ideas Fund, I was actually in hospital, and I had an amputation, and I was on a shed load of morphine, and I reckon.
Don't tell Lewis this.
As I was writing, of course, I basically wrote it totally stoned. And so what happened is the ideas got bigger and bigger and bigger, and I wrote them down, and then Ideas Fund came back and said, "Yeah, we'll go with this." And I thought, "Oh shit, we've now got to deliver this massive thing that was in my head." I was off the morphine by then, and the reality kicked in. But we did it, and we did it because of both groups and individuals. You're
Yes.
dead right. following certain individuals and allowing their work to be showcased was really important, but allowing the group's work to be really honoured and in there and acknowledged as a group of artists co-producing this piece of work alongside a professional artist. That was equally as valid. But one thing I can say about the professional artists was none of them ever said, "This is my work." They always acknowledged it was a collaboration that brought this together, and it was amazing. So one did try to describe himself as a music therapist, but we put him right on that. Very quickly, we pointed out that music therapy is a funny thing because music's still the product. Therapy is a byproduct. It's not the other way around. And that's one of the debates we've had with professionals who do art therapy and things, is that the art's what's important. The therapy happens or doesn't. But the art is still the product. The performance is the product. And for us, the product, that performance is the important part, because when you come off a stage, there is such a buzz. And I don't think that buzz ever changes. I think it's there every time you perform. I know that in terms of poetry, I still get a real buzz performing poetry now, and that for me is that's the stuff that I think forces people like me to create new neural pathways in which memory is held differently. So memory is not just held there; it's held in my hands. It's held in. That comes out, I think, when you're practicing any art. That memory comes out, and I think sometimes it's ignored as being irrelevant. And yeah, I see it as one of the most relevant parts of my life nowadays. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why it's so inspiring talking to you whilst you was developing your proposal. I think you had so much insight through that whole process. And I think that leads very nicely to a question that's in the comments. So we've got about 10 minutes left, so just to acknowledge that. But I suppose, from our perspective, we're trying to encourage you to think about the process, because the idea is about that learning between the partnership as well, and that really is being picked up by what Helen's asking in the comments. So she's off camera at the moment, but interested to hear about how you work with all the data fragments from lived experience in making sense of this all, and how you share the process. And also would like to hear more about what you've learned about this partnership between yourselves, Ron, and yourself, Kirsty, the community research partnership as well. Yeah, so 2 questions there. So
okay. So Ron loves that I don't know if you can see it. It's my giant notebook, and he always makes a crack about, have you got your giant notebook, or where is your giant notebook with you? And so, in all honesty, as I say, I am an ethnographer, so I'm not unaccustomed to having multiple forms of data in terms of interviews, field notes, and these kinds of things. I think I always look at it from a thematic view, and we always had guiding questions. So we always had things that we wanted to ask and that we were tracking along those fragments. So listening to people, like what inspires them, what happens when they are doing their particular art, what happens, how do they feel about it, even thinking about who they are when they do art, what art has meant to them. So we have tracked questions across different groups and different individuals, And then what we're really looking at is how that comes through in whatever data form it is, you know, whether it's in the interview transcript, whether it's in the film, whether it's in the photograph, etc. And sometimes they are put together. So I think of them all as a giant unit. I will say it is a organizational task, right? In terms of we have a research booklet, and I was trying to track what are all the different forms of data that I have for each site, you know. And so for any given group, for like, let's say the Ullapool group, I would have field notes, and I would have group interviews, and I would have film, and then, you know, if Willie had been there, would have a painting. And so I had to keep track of what's with each group and where it is in the process. And our questions kind of evolved, and had conversations with Leah throughout, you know, what's coming up, what might be the next thing we want to explore, or what has been brought forward, and how do we want to ask those questions, or try to get to that for everybody. So we were trying to keep things moving along, if that makes sense, in common, and at the same time allowing it to merge at the same time. So it is an organizational task in terms of the data fragments. And that is one part of the peer research, but I think we need to talk about in peer research. We talk about a lot of being involved in research design and in data gathering. We don't talk so much about data analysis. And I think, you know, for me, working with Ron and working as closely as I have been working with the peer researchers and participants in this project, allows me to be always in conversation with, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? Or this is coming up, what do you think about this? And the same thing with Leah. So the analytical conversation, if you will, has always gone alongside the collection conversation, if we're talking in research terms. It's an ongoing conversation, and it's an iterative conversation. That's very different, I think. And then you throw into that the multiplicity of data, and you throw into that a responsive research design, and you then have a giant notebook of trying to keep notes on who's got what. So, yeah, right, Ron?
No. And then maybe just for the last, so just a little 15 minutes, I do want to finish some time. I guess, Ron, we had that question either about the research design, but also thinking about what have you learned from working with a researcher? How has peer research been maybe different?
Okay, I guess for me, I've learned more about how you can value research, and how research doesn't need to look like an academic pursuit. It can actually, we can carry out the same function in terms of gathering information and find very different ways of disseminating that information, which is the I enjoy, without overcomplicating things. And I think I remember getting an email from Vivian asking me what I meant by performance as a form of dissemination. And I had a really good conversation in email form with her about that, because the more we go in, the more I talk to Kirsty, the more I see in terms of possibilities. And I think once the human mind grasps a possibility, it very quickly changes to a probability, and then to an actual thing. And I think it's only when we, the fact that Kirsty's so well versed in academia, but not what I'd call academia. I would call what Kirsty does different from. I'm still scared of academics. really, because they live a different language, whereas Kirsty can speak the arts language with me, and is comfortable with that language, and so's Lee. But I know some academics that I do work with because of what I do, and when they speak, I just hear this. I want to write poetry using every word they say, because there's so much of it that just, if you didn't put it into a piece of poetry, it wouldn't mean anything, you know. And I think what Kirsty's taught me is a different way of doing that. There's a way of doing it that can honour the arts and honour the need for information, and how to take that information and get it out. And we did that in Poland, and we did it. We're going to do it again at other conferences, and we're going to start a conversation, hopefully, with Poland. No, with Poland, with the ADI, Alzheimer's International, about things like why do you have to always just have these 11-minute sessions that people are given, and there's 6 people, and it runs like this, and everybody sits here like that, because they're trying to take in all the information. When, why can't we have it in that room? Why can't we have a performance? Why can't we have something else going on that tells that same story, but changes how that narrative is delivered? And we're hoping that in 2 years' time that we will be presenting a very different way at ADI, because I think we decided that at our last meeting, didn't we, that we were going to have a real go at the conference organisers and say it's time to change, you know, because you know, boring 300 people 10 times a day is not really up to much as far as I can see. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ron and Kirsty. There's so much in there. There's loads of questions that have just come into the chat as well. But I definitely appreciate, you know, we're just out of time. I'm very good. Quick. I mean, first off, thank you. Just really massive thank you. Really welcome any reflections from people in the chat. There's already people saying it's been really insightful. There's a few extra questions there. I either wonder if you are happy to stay a little bit longer, we can hold that. But I also appreciate that some people have to leave, and you might have to leave as well.
I think
Very
also we'll
quickly,
be, or just to say, Liz, I think we'll also be pooling all the questions, and then in our next community of practice, which will be on the 22nd of May, we'll kind of have a chance to kind of maybe come back to some of these questions, because a lot of them are really rich questions, which I think could do with some more time as well. So we'll definitely take a note of that if you aren't able to stay on or do anything else. And also just to follow on what Ron was saying about language, and I'd love to see your poetry with kind of academic speak. We, in our communities of practice, we also often do a kind of reflective exercise together. One of them is what we've been calling the living glossary, and so it's basically where we'll take a word and we'll really unpack it to think about what are the different ways in which people understand that word, how are people using it in different contexts, and what can those differences in how people use language tell us about the power dynamics that are kind of behind a lot of these things. So it'd be really nice to kind of carry on, and maybe we can bring in some of your poetry with that as well, Ron. I'm not morphine induced myself, but I feel like I've got fun ideas in my head as well. And I think Lewis has just put in a wee poll, so that should have popped up. Really helpful to get some feedback on how you found today's session, thinking about anything we could do differently next time. Of course, if you are also involved in community-led research and would like to do a session of your own, I appreciate it might feel like a hard act to follow after Ron and Kirsty's fantastic session, but hopefully you can see it's you know, an informal space and really just a chance to kind of be thinking together. Again, that power of togetherness that you talked about so well. So do let us know if you would like to find out more about that opportunity, and we can take it from there. So our next community of practice is on the 22nd of May in the afternoon. So you should have received a calendar invite automatically if you're part of the network already. If you're not part of a member of the network, you can sign up. I'll just copy over, or Iris, if you're able to copy in the link, then you can stay up to date with things. And we've got the in-person event, as we mentioned as well, on the 10th of June. There will also be information about that on our website and in our newsletter and comms. So yeah, basically kind of stay in touch, and we'll let you know about other opportunities. But obviously a massive thank you to both Ron and Kirsten, and obviously Leah, who's been doing stuff in the background as well. It's been such a privilege to spend this hour with you.
Thank you
so much. Lots to be continued. And oh yeah, there's definitely some more comments. People have had cameras off. Thank yous. Yeah, we'll keep the conversation going somehow. I don't know, Ron and Kirsty, are you able to say it like 5 more minutes, or should we end it?
I am able to. I wonder what you think, Ron.
I'm able to until my lunch suddenly appears. I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, there's so many questions in there, so I don't know if you just want to pick one more. Let's pick what big useful bit of feedback is whether or not we want to have this a bit longer or not. So Ron, yeah, there's a question from Claire. So talking for yourself, and particularly as chair of Deepness, do you have any suggestions on the best way to build relationships with your communities? I think that's people living with dementia. And Leah also, I don't know if Leah's still on the call, but yeah, interested in Leah's perspective as well on building relationships. Because I'm sure you have a lot to say about that. And Becky's also got a question there about how to manage relationships with institutions who don't understand the approach and may want to extract value from your experiences, perhaps.
Okay. Could you repeat the first question, please, Liz? Sorry.
Yes. No, of course. So Ron, yeah, do you have any suggestions of the best ways to build relationships with people living with dementia, perhaps?
See the person, not the dementia. I would say that's always the first rule. I'm amazed at how many people, when I'm out and about, I guess I have a different take on the world. I live in a wheelchair nowadays, and so I'm essentially 4'6", and the world looks very different at 4'6" than when you're upright. But I'm still amazed at how many people talk to Karen about me when I'm there, instead of asking me how I'm doing. So, and it's even the way they say it. They've got, I think there's a dementia voice, that goes something like, "How's he doing?" So I don't hear it, and I think that voice is still very prevalent in our society. And I do believe we need to challenge that. I think also, in terms of relationship, language is a source of power. And using the word dementia gives people incredible power over you. So I want to get rid of the word dementia. If I was going to confine a word into the dustbin of history, it'd be the word dementia. And I would change it to something with cognitive in it rather than dementia. Because if you look at the new list of dementia, 142, and when we see the DMS 5 revised, when we finally see that, there's going to be 142. Now, if we look at the science behind that, they're all created by a group of mainly white middle-aged men putting up their hands and saying this is an illness. Now, I've never known a science that was a democracy. Science for me is always a dictatorship. There's a rule and you have to follow the rules. So I do believe there's a lot of challenges ahead in our world. And for me, if we're going to succeed, we're going to have to prove things, and that's why I'm excited about us continuing into the second year of the research. And we'll probably be still going on in this research for a few years yet, in terms of that particular piece of work, but also putting forward ideas for how we look at the future of our world, and what will that look like, and how do we validate how it looks. And for me, right after this meeting, Kirsty and I are meeting to have a discussion about some of those things, as you do, you know. And I think for me that partnership's one of those words like co-production. It gets bandied around all the time. But I think what we have achieved in terms of our relationship is a partnership. I think I've had to compromise on some things. I think Kirsty's had to compromise on some things. And then we keep on talking, and we realise we've been talking about the same thing, just using different words. And so we then come together again and say, right, this is what we're trying to do. And that happens a lot for me, because I need to process language a lot. Yeah, so I don't know if that answered the question, but it's basically how the kind of thing I'm thinking about right in the moment, you know.
So much, Ron. And maybe just to Leah, I don't know if you would like to share some kind of reflections from your side and involvement.
Thank you very much, Lewis, Kirsty, and Ron. I think they're really important questions, you know, how to build these relationships, especially being an academic. Couple of points. One is, I think Kirsty, Ron, Karen as well, and myself shared the same philosophy. I think that's what was important. So if we want to really build relationships, we're all coming from the same place, wanting the same thing. So for me, personally, I do a lot of dementia workforce development, and I'm very passionate about empowering people living with dementia to be able to make decisions and kind of encourage students to be thinking about people that way as well. So we talk a lot about person-centered care within the clinical context. What was really attractive for me with this project was the whole idea of person-centeredness being deeply embedded in this research. We research about person-centeredness, but we don't embed person-centeredness at the core of research. But this is what was so different about this project. And the whole premise of wanting to find out the agency of autonomy through the creative expression of arts was hugely important, because I think what we were effectively asking was what mattered to people. And that we've got I teach on person-centered care. There are so many frameworks that we can all talk about. But the fundamental question is, what matters to people is what real person-centered care is. Because sometimes I think within a clinical context, education context, when we're teaching person-centered care, we are really, I often struggle with the fact, who is defining what is person-centered? And I think that's what was flipped on its head with this project, because we really took the time and the effort to ask people what mattered to them, whether it was singing, photography, art, poetry, and they were able to express themselves. So I think, so to answer the question, we need to share the same philosophy as people who are trying to find answers to the questions that are important to them. And I think the second thing that was really helpful was that Kirsty and I had a wonderful working relationship way before this project came around. So Kirsty and I have worked for a number of years together now on a project called Last Aid. And in fact, I think I invited Kirsty to explore this opportunity. And I'm really delighted that she was the right person that Ron and Karen picked, because Kirsty's got all those skills that you need as an academic researcher, but also, like what Ron explained, to be able to relate to people. And I think that's an important skill as researchers, that we are relationship focused rather than data focused, rather than evidence focused. And I think that's why this was a successful partnership, I think. And the other question was, how did I stay disconnected? I think it's important we have a certain element of objectivity, because, in qualitative research, in this kind of research, we can get too subjective, and then people start questioning the credibility of what we have found. So I took that position of being that person, distancing myself, and schedule meetings with Kirsty every week for the duration of the project. And so whether it was development of tools, looking at data, analyzing data, we did this week by week. And I think it became, stronger because we were sharing ideas. Kirsty was really on the ground giving me all these insights, but I could take a completely objective view and come back and say, maybe we should explore this more in detail, or maybe there's a different way to ask this question. So basically, shared philosophy and a good relationship with the same kind of intentions, I think, what made the project work from my experience. Thank you.
Yeah. We'll maybe one last reflection from Ron and from Kirsty to finish our little after party, if that's all right. If you have one.
What was that, Lewis?
Oh, I was just saying, I think we'll start wrapping up, but I just want to give you, if there's one last reflection, if you want to share anything or not.
I think Leah really hit on something. I think what has really made this work is that we have been there for each other. So for me personally, as the research partner, really I trust Ron to guide me, and I trust Leah to guide me, and to have them as partners. And Karen is just has meant everything. And so it's really that understanding that no one knows everything. And I know I'm harping on about it, but I do believe that togetherness is important, and really taking that seriously. It's and being there for each other, and having those multiple perspectives, and having that conversation as an ongoing thing, and keeping up with each other. And it's a lot of work. That true collaboration, deep radical collaboration, is a lot of work. And I don't think we talk about it enough. And I think that we give a lot of lip service, as Ron says, to things like partnership and co-production. And we don't, if we look at the practices really closely, they are actually not those things. So I think we need to really critically think about, what do we mean by when we use these words. That's my reflection. Ron?
That's actually a really hard question for me, because every time I think about the project, some other stuff comes up. But I think the main thing that that keeps me thinking and focusing more and more is, why is the groups that we're working with, what's making them different from a lot of the normal progression? And I heard the one psychiatrist in Poland say, you've no evidence. And he had some evidence that they never tell us about, but that we had no evidence for what we were saying. And my only counter to him was, why don't you come and see? Why don't you come to the festival next year and see a group of people with dementia do nothing? And that thing being no different from what a group of artists with any other condition would be doing. And the idea that first and foremost, we are artists rather than demented people. And I think that's the thing I've learned, is to focus on the art and just enjoy it. And in that enjoyment, find healing.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really powerful point to leave on. And hopefully for those of you on the call, maybe, you know, this is an invite also to come to the festival as well when it comes either in Edinburgh or in Inverness or in Atlanta. It's on the way. So yeah, massive thank you again. I really appreciate this extra 20 minutes. There's so much that came from that as well. So an extra special thank you. And for everyone else, will surely buy and keep in touch. Thanks again, Ron, Kirsty, and Leah.
Thank you.
Bye.